general 问题. That's a phrase you're going to hear a ton if you ever sit in and listen to me and my friends play the ARAM game mode in League of Legends. And for those of you who don't know, there's many game modes in League of Legends, but one is called ARAM, which stands for all random, all mid. And instead of having 3 lanes that you can go and run down and attack the enemy in, which have a bunch of strategy, instead it condenses the game mode into a simple 1 lane between you and the enemy, and you just kind of butt heads in the middle, and the best team wins. But more importantly, it's called all random. And it's not 100% random, but you don't get to pick your champions and the enemy doesn't get to pick theirs. You have a little bit of control, but you don't really have the option to pick your team identity. The game kind of picks it for you, and you go into the loading screen not having any clue what the enemy's bringing to the table. And the reason we say general 问题is because sometimes your team's identity is just so bad, there's no way you're going to be able to pull out a win against a well-rounded team comp. League of Legends, with some exceptions, especially at the highest level, is generally balanced around well-rounded team comps doing the best on average. I would guess a well-rounded team comp wins like 70% of the time. If you have a little bit of physical damage and mixed damage, you have some AoE, you have some single target, you have somebody to stand in the front line and soak damage, you have some crowd control, healing and shielding, all these different things. Having a good mix of them allows you to deal with just about anything the enemy can throw at you. And so a lot of times we load it, just going into the loading screen, you already know how the game is going to go. Oh, we're going to wipe the floor with them, or they're going to wipe the floor with us. Or every once in a while you're like, oh, we both have relatively well-balanced teams, this will be fun. Or, oh, their team is just as crappy as ours, this one might be fun. And of course, that's part of the charm of the ARAM game mode, is you never know what you're getting into. It does reveal the general weakness in how team comps are there. It's not designed to have a team that's full of 5 physical damage backliners to do well against almost anything. And sometimes that can mean it's not fun. There's not a ton of variety. There's variety in the units within a team comp, but there's not a ton of variety in terms of what's good in terms of team identity. And I bring this up because Chaos Zero Nightmare has a variety of characters that have a wide variety of strategies and team comps that they can assemble. We have multi-hits with morale tactics, we have card spammers, we have vulnerable appliers and nukes, we have crit units, we have AoEs and single targets, we have shields and healers, we have bullet strategies. And the hope is that each of these will have their time to shine. But I don't know if it'll end up like League of Legends, where you just want some general balance between your characters so you can kind of deal with anything the enemy can throw at you. Now, there's a game that did this really well in my opinion. It's quite different from Chaos Zero Nightmare, but I think there's something to learn from it, and that's the Spirit Engine 2. This game came out in 2008 or 9, a long time ago. I know I'm dating myself a little bit there, but I think it's a really good example of a game that had diverse team compositions, even without a huge variety of playable characters. There are only 9 playable characters, and they each fall into a different combat archetype and personality archetype. There are the headstrong characters in the first row, there are the kind of naive younger characters in the middle row, and then the older wiser characters in the third row. And then combat wise, in the left column there are the tanky knights who can heal and deal lots of physical frontline damage. There are the musketeers in the middle who have really good dodge chance and can have lots of backline access. And then there are the priests who have healing, they have good protection against magic damage, and they have good AoE. And I bring this up because in that game you're able to pick any comp, and it's suggested that you start with 1 knight, 1 musketeer, and 1 priest. That probably will make all the enemies about equally difficult, but you can play with any comp that you want. I've beat that game probably 6 or 7 times now, and the last 3 times I did it on the absurd difficulty using a team of all knights, a team of all musketeers, and a team of all priests. Because you can go through, and each world that you go through is designed with a variety of enemies that will be easy for certain classes to deal with and hard for other ones. And the bosses accentuate that as well. And the game's designed in such a way that oftentimes the reason you lose to a boss is not because, oh, this character, this boss counters me, but because you haven't looked at your character's kits enough. And maybe for a little bit you have to switch out an item or two, or move some stat points around just a little bit and have a character use an ability that's maybe not their first choice or not something you've thought of before, but for this particular fight or this particular boss, it'll allow you to just eke out a win so that you can keep moving on. And each run, again on the absurd difficulty, you would find that different areas that were really easy for one are really challenging for another comp. And you may find that areas with one giant boss are really easy for the musketeers to deal with, who have this big shot damage that does a ton of damage against large units. And then the magic type bosses are really easy for the priests, who have these huge magic auras that shield them against all magic damage, and they can just kind of chip away at the bosses. And this wide variety allows you to play the game with even with only 9 characters and 3 different archetypes of characters, you still feel like you're exploring a wide variety of compositional strategies in a single player game developed by one person. Every run feels like it's different. There's other things that added on to that. There's a huge narrative difference between each of the characters. There's interactions and stuff that made it incredibly immersive. This is one of the few games, you know me, I'm not a big story person, but I actually read the story for every character's interaction because it was fun to read. Sometimes the moments will bring you to tears. But all that aside, the game clearly was designed in such a way to promote not just playing with one well-balanced comp of one knight, one priest, and one musketeer, but they wanted you to focus on the different styles, whether it be, making one guy super tanky or giving one of the musketeers a ton of dodge chance so she basically becomes a pseudo frontliner because she never gets hit, or making you just immune to certain types of damage like the priest do. So why do I bring up this particular game or this particular style of play? I bring it up because gacha games in general, in my personal opinion, if not a ton of thought goes into the actual battle design, they tend to fall into that trap where a couple OP characters can be reused over and over and over for all the content, and players get bored because they never have something new to engage with, something new that they have to strategize over, right? You think of once you get a couple pilgrims in Nikkei, you can kind of just auto everything that you need to. You don't really need to think anymore. Once you get certain characters in DFL2, once you get a Kluke, right, you kind of just auto everything at that point. You don't really need to care about strategy because these characters will just mop the floor with the enemies, and all strategy is kind of out the window. And at that point, the game has lost the engagement, and mostly they're just relying on FOMO for you to spend money, for players that just want to maintain their accounts. But there's nothing really engaging, in my personal opinion, at that point. They're just hoping that a certain event or a particular character will be your style or something, but not that the gameplay itself will be engaging. I know in one of the developer commentaries earlier in the year that the developers did mention their commitment to creating content with a variety of penalties, and we saw that a little bit. I believe there was a boss that would penalize you if you played too many cards, and I believe there was a boss, and it might have been the same one, that would penalize you for just taking too long because they would have a scaling self-morality buff, and eventually any defenses that you had or any stalled tactics would just be outscaled because it would just wipe the floor with you, so you needed eventually to deal damage. And that shows that they're at least cognizant of punishing and promoting different play styles for different types of bosses so that players have to build different characters. And that's what I really hope that they can accomplish with this game. I think it'll have a lot more sticking power with those of us who like more strategy in our games, that you can't just build whatever the most broken character is at the moment and 10 out of 10 put them in every single comp because they'll always be good. I hope that the different worlds have different styles, and going in oh, this is one where stress is really bad, or this is one where healing isn't as good, or this is one that has a ton of ads, and so you need AoE abilities to deal with them quickly, and you can focus on the bosses after that, right? I hope that they're thinking about these kinds of things, and that they can deliver a good game at the end of the day. So what do you think? So are there games that have done that for you, that have encouraged a wide variety of team compositions and kind of established a little bit of replayability for themselves, because each time you're faced with the same enemies, or you're faced with slightly varying enemies, but you have to employ different strategies to defeat them. And it's not just oh, there's some SS tier character that just helps you clear everything and you can just brain dead auto play at that point.